Hey vinyl community, this is Tim with the University of Vinyl. I'm back with a new video, and it's been a while since I've done a mastering engineer focused video, so I'm going to do another one of those today. And if you're new to the channel, hey, thank you for stopping by, checking me out. I appreciate it. You will find a playlist of several videos that I've done that have been pretty well received. I think the Bob Ludwig video that I did is now approaching 50,000 views. So thank you YouTube viewers at large and VC members and subscribers for viewing all these videos. Always greatly appreciated. Anyway, check out that playlist. I have done, I think I'm on number 8 or 9 with the new one that I'm going to do today. So stay tuned for next. I've got 5 outstanding albums I want to share today. Just a little background on these videos. I go out and feature, first of all, I feature a mastering engineer that's pretty well renowned in the recording industry. I've featured everyone from Bob Ludwig to Bernie Grundman to Ted Jensen with Sterling Sound, George Mariano with Sterling Sound. Today, I'm going to feature one of the OGs, one of the greats of the business. The gentleman's name is George Piros. He got his start in the early 1950s with an outfit called Fine Recording Studio. They were based in Manhattan on West 57th Street. He did jazz, classical, pop titles for that imprint all the way up until around 1968, where he made the move over to Atlantic Records, and he has been responsible for some of the greatest sounding first pressings and reissues that audiophiles seek out every single day in the whole vinyl universe. You know, when I started researching George Piros, it kind of started with me. I knew that he was very well regarded as far as Led Zeppelin is concerned. So I do have one Led Zeppelin title that he mastered that we're going to talk about today. But one that I do not have that everyone should be aware of. First of all, George Piros mastered Led Zeppelin 1 all the way up through Physical Graffiti. And in all of these cases, these were represses or reissues, mainly in the early to mid to late 1970s. The Led Zeppelin 2 George Piros cut is highly regarded out there as almost as good as the revered Bob Ludwig hot mix cut. And that repressing, I think that came out in 75, 76, 77, somewhere there or abouts. But go on Discogs, see if you can find one of those, or keep your eyes peeled in shops, and you might be able to find that famous George Piros pressing of Led Zeppelin 2. So where was I? When I started researching George Piros, of course I went to Discogs, and there was a quote under the review section, which was kind of interesting, and I'm going to just read it real quick. There is nothing like a beautiful sounding George Piros pressing of rock and roll Atlantic Records USA pressings. Discogs user from 2014. So if you go on to Steve Hoffman forums and type in George Piros, you will find thread upon thread upon thread dealing with George Piros cuts. And almost everything that he touched turned out fantastic. He is known for a very, very, very detailed sound, plenty of low end, kind of a full sound stage, and just a nice, crisp overall presentation of the recording. Nothing, too much as far as too much high end or too much low end. A fully rounded wide soundstage on the majority of the pressings that he's responsible for. There are many people in the VC who will regard the George Piros Led Zeppelin 1 mastered copy as one of the top copies to seek out for your main copy. What I have here is the 1974 repress of Led Zeppelin 1. Of course, this is the famous debut album, came out in 1969. And that, of course, is on that iconic Atlantic label. You want to look for ATGP in the dead wax on side 1 and side 2. This is a great sounding recording. It is full of bottom end bass, punchy, wide soundstage, very detailed, lots of clarity, lots of separation in between instruments, not muddy at all. If you're looking for a reasonably priced copy of this iconic album, I would start with the George Piros cut. You can find that. I found a 1974 Monarch pressing, which sounds fantastic. That's Led Zeppelin, 1969. I'm talking about the George Piros cut, and the particular one that I'm talking about is a 1974 Monarch pressing. Fantastic sounding record. When we talk about live albums or famous live albums in the entire rock and roll genre, this album ranks very, very high. Of course, this is the Allman Brothers live at Fillmore East from 1971. This is an early first pressing, mastered by George Piros, and it's on that gorgeous pink Capricorn label. This is a time capsule. I mean, you put this album on, and it is a double album. You're looking for AT for Atlantic Records and GP for George Piros in the dead wax on all four sides of these two records. Where was I? You put this album on, and you kind of sound like you're on the Lower East Side of New York City, whenever the hell this was recorded. I'm assuming sometime in 1970. And the mix is fantastic. The separation is great. There is tons of clarity and a little bit of nice, very detailed listening on Duane Allman's guitar lines and guitar phrasing. Just sounds fantastic. This is highly regarded out there in the vinyl community as one of the best sounding pressings that you can find. I believe there is also a MoFi and a Classic Records release, but if you delve into the Steve Hoffman forums, a lot of people out there are saying this is still number one, the OG on the pink Capricorn label, mastered by George Piros. In 1970, Crosby, Stills, and Nash decided to invite Neil Young into their little party, and what eventually came out was Deja Vu in 1970. Of course, the original CSN album, the Couch album, is a 1969 product, and they came back with Neil on board for Deja Vu. I am holding a 1972 repress of this album, and it's a fantastic specimen. It's got the old-timey group photo that's actually pasted on to the cover. This has got the textured leatherette, and we know it's not an original pressing. It's got that gold metal sticker on it. So, if it came out in 1970, it's not it's not going to be a gold medal record out of the gate. So hence a little bit of research into Dead Wax. This is a 1972 repress. There is AT and GP in the Dead Wax for Atlantic Records and George Piros. Sounds very, very good. I'm lucky here because I have a dead silent near mint example that I've picked up recently. I was kind of shocked to find this thing. It is very, very well preserved. And I even have not had time yet to put it in my archival sleeves, but I'll be doing that soon. Anyway, another fantastic George Piros cut. This is a 72 reissue of Deja Vu. In 1975, that trio of Australian/UK brothers were in between a rock and a hard place. They were struggling to keep things going as far as their group was concerned. I think they had actually broken up in the early 70s, decided to get back together. I'm talking about the Bee Gees. If you have not seen the recent documentary, I think it was on HBO, the Bee Gees documentary, I think it came out in late 2020, last year. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. Check it out. I'm talking today, though, about Main Course. This is the 1975 Bee Gees album. Probably my favorite Bee Gees album of all the stuff that they have put out. 75, they're just starting to kind of jump on the disco train. Barry is using that falsetto for, I think, the earliest time on record. Or, I am not a completionist as far as the Bee Gees go, so I might be wrong on the falsetto history of Barry. But I will say this album has got one of the most fantastic 1-2 punch openings in rock and roll history. Of course, I'm talking about side one. We've got Nights on Broadway, followed up by Jive Talking. And while we're at it, Wind of Change is no slouch as far as a fantastic song is concerned. And it ends up, side one, Fanny, Be Tender With My Love. That is just a tour de force as far as the harmonies by the brothers. Fantastic song. This is almost a perfect side on this album. Songbird, the fourth song on side one, I could go either way on. But let's talk about, there is the back end of that album. Nights on Broadway. These guys are just firing on all cylinders. And that song, it just sounds incredible. The first verse, you've got Barry Gibb in kind of his natural register. Kind of a tough sounding Barry in the opening phrases of that song. And then Robin steps in for the second verse. And then eventually you've got Barry going into that falsetto for the Nights on Broadway refrain. And it is one of my favorite songs. I've got to say it. It's one of my favorite songs. And this pressing does sound amazing. It's on the Polydor label. But you will, I'm sorry, it's on the RSO label, not the Polydor. That's the one you want to look for. And look for ATGP in the Dead Wax on side 1 and side 2. In 1980, those two divorced couples from Sweden were kind of reaching the end of the road, and they came out with one of my favorite ABBA records, which is Super Trooper. Am I getting a little glare here today? And there's something to like on every ABBA album. Everybody knows that. These guys were just fine pop craftsmen, especially Benny and Bjorn. They were the architects of these songs. And, they were digging deep on all of their influences, whether it was Motown, the Beatles, some classical touches as well. This was on, the pressing I have is, of course, on that green and orangish red Atlantic label. There is an @ symbol and then GP for George Piros, both sides of the dead wax. The reason this is one of my favorites, it's mainly for one song, The Winner Takes It All. This song will kind of tug at your heartstrings. If you know the backstory of the couples divorcing, the band is reaching its end. A very, very poignant song. Great instrumentation. There's also a couple other good songs on here. Super Trooper is an example. But for me, it's The Winner Takes It All. That is Super Trooper, 1980, mastered by George Piros. Those are 5 albums mastered by George Piros. They all sound incredible. They're fairly easy to find out there in the marketplace, in used shops, antique stalls, Discogs, eBay, for not a ton of cash. You can find Led Zeppelin 1, that repressing that I have. It's a 1974 Monarch pressing. I paid $18 for that. So that just tells you, what we're thinking about here as far as pricing is concerned. I've got a kind of a bonus that I'm going to throw out here too. This is one of the most fantastic prog albums of all time. Of course, it's by Genesis. This was in their classic Gabriel years. Selling England by the Pound. This is a bit of a weird one. So I have an Atlantic repressing, and only one side has got the George Piros etching in it, and that's side 2. Now, Selling England by the Pound is a problematic album as far as vinyl issues are concerned. The gold standard out there that most people talk about is the first UK press by George Peckham. I've also featured George on an earlier video. I don't have that copy, and I was kind of interested when I was researching this episode. I found out about this 1980 repress that Piros did, side 2, and there's a couple threads saying, side 2, the Piros cut from 1980, strangely enough, rivals the Peckham first issue on the UK pressing. But I just wanted to throw it out there. If you are looking for a good half-sounding copy of Selling England by the Pound, go check it out. The issue with Genesis are they undertook a whole series of remasters and remixes. I am forgetting the name of the main guy that they used, but the opinions out there are they're all across the spectrum, but a lot of people they dislike those reissues. And they point to George Peckham and the original UK mix as the one to seek out. But if you're looking for side 2, that sounds fantastic, of Selling England by the Pound. What an amazing album. There's over 50 minutes of music on this album. That's the problem. If it's not on a 45 cut and you can spread these songs out on 2 different albums, it's already going to be, you're pushing it, right? Anyway, that's a little bonus, half an album mastered by George Piros. That sounds great. That's a wrap. Thank you everybody for watching. I'll be back later in the week with another video, maybe 2 if I have time. I'm going to put in another plug. I have just launched brand new channel merch that you can purchase to help support the channel. If you're looking for a cool t-shirt, maybe some holographic stickers, maybe even one of those hipster ceramic coffee mugs, I'm going to drop a link to the shop in the description of the video and also in the comments. Thanks everybody. Wishing you all a great